Hello, everybody, and welcome into another Sharks News and Rumors here at the Hockey Writers. I'm your host, Matthew Zator, and as always, joined in by Alex Hutton. Alex, how's it going?
Going good. Yeah, it's been a long time since we've done one of these, but coming back from the Olympics feels like a good time to get back into this.
100%. And I mean, we could talk about Celebrini's really great Olympics. Well, we can maybe quickly touch on that. I mean, Canada didn't win a gold medal, unfortunately, but Celebrini was one of their best players, and I mean, maybe it's not a surprise. He's been one of the NHL's best players all season. But yeah, he was really one of the standouts for Team Canada, and he could probably had a couple goals in the gold medal game, but couldn't get it. What do you think about Celebrini's performance in the Olympics there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was great to show that he can be a great standout player, not just on a team with maybe a little bit less talent like the Sharks, but he can do it on a literally the team with some of the best players in the world. You got maybe the two best players in the world right
Mm.
there, McDavid and McKinnon, and he is holding his own with them. Playing on the same line with those guys and still being the same dominant player who can control the game in a pretty similar way to the way he does on the Sharks, and watching that translate to a best on best tournament was very entertaining to watch, both from a Sharks perspective and then also in general, just as people, as fans who
Mm.
like hockey and like seeing who's the future of hockey. Like watching a player like that do what he did was really exciting.
Yeah, and I mean he's continued as he returned from the Olympics and he's still producing. He's still the Sharks' best player. I mean they bolstered their lineup with Kiefer Sherwood. We talked about the trade there, and we were talking about could he stay as a long-term piece. Well, that question was answered today, and I signed a 5-year extension with the Sharks and a pretty big cap hit. I mean, everyone's talking about over 5 million. That ended up being the case. What do you think about that extension? This is a veteran forward getting. We talk about the rebuild being, kind of in a different stage. It seems now they're trying to keep veteran players, and this is another one. Sherwood is he's a veteran. He's going to be here now through this, I guess, transition phase from a rebuild to a playoff team. Uh, what do you think about the deal?
Yeah, I think there's positives and some. I'm not gonna say negatives. I think it's too early to make that kind of comment on, but definitely some questions that need to be answered. I think the amount where it was just a little bit under 6 million a year. I think that's gonna be okay. With the cap going
Mm.
up and everything, I think they'll age a little bit better than it looks right now on the current cap versus what the cap's going to be in a few years. I think if you're planned out ahead, it ends up being okay. The 5 years is a little bit of a question. He's about to turn 31, and
Mm.
obviously that physical sort of grinder type. Those players don't always age great. So a few seasons from now, that's something that I think you're gonna have to look at and figure out how that works. So I think that's the big question there. I do like that they're like committing to locking down players and figuring out here's who we want to be here for the next phase of things.
Mm.
Like you said, that transition from rebuilder to contender, like that they're identifying him between this and Wenberg and Eklund, like, all
Mm.
these guys. And obviously, some of these players currently on their entry level contracts who will get bigger contracts eventually as well. So I do like that. I'm also just I think Kiefer Sherwood is a great story. He was undrafted, really had to grind his way, spent a ton of time in the AHL to get to this point,
Mm.
and now gets a huge contract. So regardless of anything else of the team aspect or what it's going to do for the Sharks cap situation a few years from now, it's good for him. And just from the
Mm.
human side of things, I was happy to see him get a big payday.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I know Kiefer Sherwood quite well. I last couple seasons with the Canucks, and I had really great, numbers with the team. I was one of their top scorers, which is very surprising. When he was brought in as a free agent, he was supposed to be just a good fourth line grinder that could hit. I mean, that and occasionally score, maybe 5-6 goals a season, but he ended up getting double digits in both seasons he was with the team, and left the team as their leading goal scorer, which I I mean that's just he was a great story. I mean, you said about the great story. I loved him. I loved him watching him play. I mean, his passion for the game, his physicality, his speed. He has a really underrated shot as well, which I he showed off quite a bit, and he has some really soft hands for a guy that okay wasn't really a goal scorer before and in his career. And I mean, in the AHL, he was always a goal scorer, but I think one of those guys that you love seeing him succeed. And I don't know if this is the Kiefer Sherwood you're going to see over these 5 years, if he's going to be an 18 to 20 goal scorer every season. You'd hope so with what he's getting paid, but I think it's it's a good deal. And, with, like you say, with the cap going up, it's not as big of a thing as it used to be when you're saying a little under 6 million, in the days of Louis Eriksson, when he was paid 6 million in free agency, everyone was, that's a lot of money. Right now, that's not really a ton of money for comparatively to other contracts. So I think it'll age okay. I think he's still going to be a 15 goal guy. I don't know about the, being 20 or whatever, but I think he's still going to be a really effective player for the Sharks as they, moving through. It's not just as a guy on the ice, but in the room, because he's a really great personality as well. So I like it as a deal for him as well. All right. Well, beyond, having Sherwood now, that was, I guess you could call a trade deadline move. What else do you think the Sharks have up their sleeve? I mean, is there anything else that they can do? Or, I mean, they are not in the playoffs as we're recording right now, but they are a few points out of it. They're not pretending to be a seller. I don't know if are they a buyer or maybe a stand pat? Maybe, I don't know. I mean, what do you think the Sharks are going to do?
Yeah, they're kind of sort of in between all that, and I think in pretty much every season that Mike Grier has been the general manager, he's made some moves at the deadline. Obviously, it was a different team then than it is now, but he always does something a little bit unexpected that no one really saw coming until the news suddenly breaks. So I do expect them to make some moves. They are kind of in this weird in between thing where they might try to clear out a couple players just to make room for some guys. Where some defensemen. We've been talking about it in multiple of these videos where they got a lot of defensemen who they're trying to move. So I don't know what kind of value they're going to get, but some of these people on the expiring contracts, like a John Klingberg or a Mario Ferraro, might be dangled out there. And I don't know how much the return would be, but I think you have to at least explore trading those guys. Up front, I think Philip Kurashev would definitely be a name that you could see moved out, just because they're trying to make room for someone like an Igor Chernyshov to get more time at the NHL level. But I don't think they should make any sort of big blockbuster moves. I think it's still too early to really swing for something like that, just because if nothing else, you want to see how this team and this core you built up, how they handle at least one push for the playoffs and a postseason appearance if they were to get there. So I think it's still a little bit too early. With Sherwood now being locked down, you've seen people floating out there around would they eventually trade someone like William Eklund? And I don't think it's going to happen yet. But I do understand why those rumors are out there. But I think at this point, you want to sort of pay off what you've been building up so far. And I don't think they're quite at that point of their rebuild where they can start really going all out. Where they still got to wait back a little bit and keep building up what they've got so far. And then Pavel Regenda, I would think is one person who has had kind of that breakout season a little bit this year. Maybe his name gets thrown around and stuff a little bit. We'll see.
He's also great in the Olympics too.
Yeah,
he's probably one of their. It's Czechia, right?
Slovakia, I think.
Slovakia, yeah. But yeah, one of the best players there. So I think that's one guy that could potentially get some interest at the deadline as well. It's going to be interesting to see what the Sharks do because they're in that in between stage. You don't really want to be gutting any young players or getting, all of a sudden making those big moves right now. Because who are you going to play in the first round? You're going to be playing the Colorado Avalanche most likely. If they end up being in the final wild card spot. So is that a team you really think you're going to have a chance with right now? I don't think so, but they're not in that position. It'd be great to have the experience of the playoffs. But to make moves where you're trading young guys at this point, I don't know if that's a good idea. So we'll see what the Sharks ultimately do around the deadline. It's a very weird position where a team that's been rebuilding are in this. Like Montreal Canadiens was an example last season where at the deadline they didn't do anything. And that's might have been a good idea because they actually had a pretty good playoff, even though they did get eliminated in the first round. But that experience is there, and they didn't trade any, their young guys to, right. And they still really haven't, even in a playoff position. So I think the Sharks are probably in that same area right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think this year is not so much about, beating the Avalanche necessarily. I mean, as great as that would be, obviously, if they were to get to that point, it's about getting the experience of getting someone like a Macklin Celebrini or a Will Smith, that experience of a playoff push or a potential playoff run, and gearing up for what's to come down the line. And it's especially because this has been so unexpected. No one really saw it coming this year, of just how far they've gotten and how close they are to a playoff spot right now. That's what this season is about. So I think that as that standing pat argument of let's just keep going what we have right now, since it's gone so surprisingly well.
Yeah, and I think the biggest is that experience. Not just even if they don't make the playoffs, being in, which they haven't been, even now they're completely out of it at this point, in previous seasons where it's like they're just playing it out. They're not even in any pressure. And right now they are. So, I mean, every game that means something, and that's a big deal for these young guys to be in a playoff environment, I guess, right? And that's something they haven't had. So yeah, that's even just right now being in that position is great for these young guys, especially Celebrini, who, I mean, he hasn't, like you mentioned, hasn't slowed down. He's still one of the top point getters in the NHL, and will probably be in the conversation for the Hart Trophy, especially if they make the playoffs, right? So that's going to be interesting to see. All right. Well, thanks, Alex, for coming on, and we'll talk to you maybe next week if there's any big trades that the Sharks do make at the deadline. And we'll keep going, and maybe we'll have a playoff preview down the line. But that's going to be interesting. I haven't had one for the Sharks as much as I've been here, so that's going to be interesting. So thanks, Alex, for coming on as always. Make sure to check out everything at thehockeywriters.com. We got great content for the Sharks, for all the teams, and deadline coverage. We've got great stuff going on there. So lots of stuff that could happen or not. I mean, there's some big trades in the discussion right now with trades being having to be waived, trade clauses having to be waived and all that. But we'll see if the Sharks do anything. But until our next video, we will see you next time.